Brian Gill here with Hunt Primitive, and today we're going to do a quick little piece on the moccasins that I wear and how we can seal them to be more water resistant. So we'll first lead off by saying that these moccasins that you see me wearing, for the most part, they come from Moccasins Canada, and you can purchase them directly on their site, moccasinscanada.com. And if you want to purchase from my site, that's fine too, HuntPrimitive.com. And that would be if you wanted to tack on, a pair of moccasins with a bow and arrow order, or an atlatl, or stone points, any of that stuff that I make. If you just want the moccasins, you might as well just head right on over, skip the middleman, and go see Moccasins Canada directly. But we'll go through and talk about the different stages of where these moccasins are currently at, and then also how we're going to seal them, because I get a lot of questions. Are they waterproof? And or how do you seal them if they are not? So when you get them from Moccasins Canada, they are not waterproof or water resistant. In fact, it's leather, and it's like a sponge essentially. If you walk through wet grass, it's just going to absorb that moisture. It takes a little while to work through it to get to your feet, but it will do it. So you're going to want to do some waterproofing if you plan on hunting in these like I do. So if we go all the way back to the very first pair that I got, which is these, and obviously they look very tattered and worn, and that's because they are. I have put these things through the ringer, but they are still in the game. These originally came with the crepe sole on them, and I didn't know what kind of sole I wanted. And that's an unrefined rubber sole. And now that is no longer on these. I prefer to have a little bit more contact with my feet to the ground so I can feel what's underneath me when I step, so I can sneak quietly. And of course, this is all for a hunting application. If you watch the videos I do hunting big game with primitive bows and atlatls. So after wearing the crepe sole for a while, I took that crepe sole off. I cut the stitching and took it off, and that was after I got a new pair, so I wasn't worried about damaging the old pair. And I said, let's just go really primitive with these ones. So there's nothing on the bottom, just straight leather. But the downside is if you do that, they're going to have the stitching holes all the way around. And it's very difficult to try to seal those holes up, because while you're walking on them, you're just squishing moisture into your foot. So I don't recommend buying the crepe soles just to cut the crepe soles off like I did. That was an afterthought. But anyway, that's what these are, and that's why they look like this. So what I did, though, in these to waterproof them and plug up those holes at the bottom the best that I could, I went with a very primitive sealer on these, and it is bear grease that actually my buddy Keith Sayers from Ramshackle Homestead, if you don't follow him on YouTube, give him or Facebook or Instagram or any of them places, give him a look up, because he's got some pretty cool stuff. But I got some bear grease from him, and then I mixed that in this clay pot. It's a little hot because it's warmed up, because you have to kind of melt it a little bit. I mixed that with a little bit of beeswax, so bear's grease and beeswax, and just a little bit of pine pitch I put in there, and I think it's for the darker color that I like, and it gives it a little bit of that piney smell, which I like as well, as opposed to the bear grease smell. So once you have this heated up, I just take a little stick and I can just apply it on. And then I just work it in with my fingers. Just rub it in, and that's going to give it a nice oiled look to it, and that will repel water very, very well. Now, of course, around the top stitching, you're going to want to work that in a little bit more. Really try to pack that to shed the water off of that stitching. And of course, these ones need a new coat of sealer, so I'll end up redoing all these ones here shortly. But let's move on down the line, and then we'll tell you about the next set. And this is the set that you get if you want the oil tanned leather sole. So this one does not come with that small crepe unrefined leather or rubber sole. This one is just leather, and that's what these look like here, and it's a little thicker. So for people that aren't used to walking around in really thin moccasins or bare feet, this is a good option for hunting, simply because it does afford a little bit more cushion, and it's a little bit more robust in general. Now, I got this set last season. I've been hunting it, but there's actually no sealer on these whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to go completely on the other side of the spectrum, where we're going to go with a modern sealer. and that is, it's an aerosol, and I believe it's pronounced Tana, which is T-A-N-A. I've never used this stuff before. I just gave it a quick try, and it's just an aerosol, and what it says to do is you just hold it up and give it a spray. Now, of course, it changes the color, but it does dry. I did do a test piece on this as well. But you're going to want to spray the whole thing, and I would probably do more than one coat, and make sure you get the stitchings really well, and down in all the seams, anywhere that you're going to have water, slush, any of that stuff. Now, of course, I imagine it may make the bottom of the sloles a little bit slippery, but if you go out and just kind of rough them up a skosh, I think you'll be back to good. Plus, these ones, you know, oil tan, so they're already a little more water resistant anyway. So get those stitchings really good, and then you're going to let this dry, and as it dries, you're going to see it goes right back to the original color. So it's just, if you like that light color on it, and I don't believe that this waterproofs as much as just makes it a little bit more so dirt and snow and everything doesn't stick into it, and it sheds water a little bit. Under no stretch of the imagination are you going to be able to wade a stream in these and expect to keep dry. That's just not how moccasins work. You just kick them off, wade across the stream, put them back on like I did in Idaho, if you've seen that video where we went out and hunted elk. I took them off, waded across the stream, put them back on. So that is that option, and you can get this at Moccasins Canada as well. I don't sell any of this stuff on my website. If you want the sealers and stuff to go with it, go to Moccasins Canada for it. So now let's move on down the line a little bit further, and this is a brand new pair that just came in yesterday, and unfortunately this exact model is not available to the public yet. Maybe in the future we can talk them into it, I don't know, but I specifically had a pair custom made for me that has no sole whatsoever. It is just the moose hide leather, and it's that thick. There is nothing else in here, and that just gives me a little bit of insulation if I'm walking in colder climates, and a little bit of protection from stuff like those little sharp sand spurs and you know, the little tiny cactus hairs, anything like that. It's not going to offer a great deal of protection, but it's enough that it's a little bit better than bare feet, and it still is going to be a very, very quiet surface to walk on. It's essentially like wearing socks in the woods. So I wanted something that had no stitchings whatsoever and as thin as I could, because like I said, I like to have a lot of contact with the ground so I can feel the sticks under me as I lay my foot down, so I can stop before they pop and I can move my foot. So what we're going to do is a different type of sealer on these, and then we'll get to try that out. And this is something they have that's new, and I don't think anybody's really used it as of yet, but it's just called Rain and Snow, and it's a wax oil waterproofing. Okay, and so it does say that it does say waterproofing, but again, I imagine if you waded a stream with it, they're going to get pretty wet. And it says gives superior water repellency. So I want to give this a try, and the reason that I want to do it on these ones is because I think that this is kind of the modern equivalent to this this really primitive version, because it's wax and oil, and that's essentially what this is. It's a wax and oil. So this is just going to be a commercially refined version. If you don't want to mix up your own bear grease and beeswax in a clay pot and melt it down and work it in like that, then this is probably a good option. Now this will darken, I do believe, this leather. I did a little test spot to see, yeah, and it does just a little bit, and it says to give 2 coats for maximum water repellency. So according to the directions, it says to apply it with a cloth or a brush, and so that is exactly what we're going to do here. And what I will do is rub this in really well, and it's going to be the same thing on the stitchings too. We're just going to want to really work that in. But see, I prefer the darker color anyway, so I think that this is a good way to really test this out. And if in the future it doesn't work as well as I would like, I can always switch back to the old bear grease and wax. But again, I think it's pretty much the same exact thing. So it just doesn't need heated to be applied. So we're going to work all of that in. I'm going to waterproof these out. I'm going to go ahead and rub all these in. I'm going to give these ones a new coat. Then we're going to do a little bit of a test. We'll run through some wet grass and whatnot, and maybe stand in a little bit of a puddle, and I can give you an idea as to how well it works. Alright, we did our little preliminary test out there. Now we didn't test these ones again, the ones that are primitively sealed, because we already gained all the data off these that we need to in the bison hunt in Missouri, where I hunted all day in slushy mud and really abused these really bad. And they worked really good at repelling water, except for the 1 weak link was the stitching holes at the bottom that are open. Even though I tried to cram wax and stuff in there, eventually you tramping through the mud crams the wax out and the moisture up in. But of course that's to nobody's fault except my own, that I took that sole off and left those holes there. So that's the only downside in that. Otherwise the primitive sealer works really, really well. So then let's move down the line here to the aerosol, which is to me going to be more of a light duty application. I don't know that I would use this necessarily in a hunting situation, simply because as we stood in the water, they didn't leak, but they did start to absorb the moisture, absorb the water that we're standing in. And so over time, I think that it will eventually permeate and basically turn you into a sponge, your foot into a sponge. So I think that this is great to spray these, retain the pretty new color of them, wear them around. You get a little bit of dirt, a little bit of snow, a little bit of water on them. It's not going to stain it. I think that that's what this is it's kind of that out exterior protection against dirt and snow and water stains and such like that. It does help, but to me it's not going to be the best for hunters. Wear this stuff out and walk through a stream. If you're in grass all day that's wet, or all morning, I think that your feet are going to end up wet by the end of the day. I think we have a better option. And I'm actually really happy with this rain and snow that we rubbed in. I rubbed it in really, really well. And I stood in water even longer with these, simply because I really wanted to put it through the paces. And again, the only place that I have seen anything from moisture, and that's on all of these, is the eyelets for the lacing goes through. Now obviously, you can see your skin when you look through it, so it's wide open. These are not meant for wading up to here through water. That's not at all what moccasins are for. But these eyelets, if you splash into them, that is where the only place on this that I got moisture standing in the water. So, and I think, again, maybe some of the stitchings around the top, they're a little bit larger whenever you see them. That may as well. I didn't have any water come through them, but obviously I wasn't submerged. It beaded the water really well. But I think in time, hunting, all morning or through some swampy areas, that we may get a little bit of water down through the top stitching. Probably a little bit maybe on the side, it's hard to say. But again, I think if it's just passively and you cross a little wet spot, I don't think you're going to have a problem, because I was standing in water and my feet are not wet, except for just 2 little spots right here where I've splashed water in. So if you want to avoid that in the future, maybe take a little bit of wax and cram in there. If you're concerned about it. I'm not terribly concerned. I don't mind a little tiny wet spot. I just don't want my feet to be soaking wet. So I think for a modern application, I think that this is a great system to use on these. In fact, I'm really looking forward to trying this more in the woods this year. So this will be the new set that I work with. And of course, we'll keep returning back to these as a backup. But we know that weak link with the stitchings that I removed on the sole, that's the only thing that's keeping me from staying really dry. And of course, if this doesn't work in the long-term future, we'll go ahead and apply the heavier wax primitive application, but I think this one's just going to be just fine. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope this answers some questions, and please visit moccasinscanada.com or huntprimitive.com, and hopefully we'll see some video and pictures of your own adventures.